The very reason someone hires you is because you're bringing something in that is uniquely yours, you know? And the longer we go thinking I am an actor, that vague concept of what an artist, let's say artist in general is, the longer we keep thinking we know what that means, the further away from it we're really getting. The X factor is always you. And you only feed yourself by doing the things you love, not the things that, you think you should be doing.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Chukwudi Iwuji is an actor. He sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work.
You said many times that your first step is to learn the lines to the point of, like, you can do them backwards if you had to.
Yeah.
And getting that down first. Have there been any drawbacks to this? Like, is there a drawback to getting the lines down so much before you even have a good grasp of the character?
Personally, I am aware of I'm aware of the arguments against it. You want to keep it fresh. You want to learn the lines associated with movement or with the psychology of the character. And why my counterpoint to that is that the lines are the psychology of the character. Again, this is probably very much because of my background in Shakespeare. And when I've worked with writers who direct their actors through their writing, which the greats do, funny enough, which James Gunn also does, is the psychology of the character tells me if this guy speaks in short lines, if this guy swears a lot, if this guy has a lot of thoughts within one line. So yesterday I was going to them, Mom, did you call that? Jenny, what are you doing in that? Okay, where was I before? That tells me about this guy. Mm-hmm. If it's written that way, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If it's written where there's one line and a gap and then he next speaks, that tells me something else about him. So my counterpoint to the danger of learning the lines is, I don't know where else to start looking for the character, but in the lines. And the beauty about knowing something so well, i.e. driving, I'm not thinking about how fast should I be going around this curve. I'm feeling the car because I've done it so many times that I can be talking to you next to me and know I shouldn't be on the brakes as I'm going around this curve. I'm not telling myself don't be on the brakes. I just know I'm not on the brakes. The best single piece of advice for acting I ever read, I believe it was James Cagney, or it might have been Spencer Tracy. I don't know. But it was, I find my mark, look the other guy in the eyes, and I tell the truth. I can't look the other guy in the eyes, really look and listen if I'm worried about what I'm saying next.
That's big.
Acting is reacting. My counteracting is reacting. It's not about, my emotional life doesn't matter. It's affecting the other person's emotional life. And that means being able to be completely present for them. And that doesn't happen if I'm struggling with lines. That's my belief.
Because you have so much theater experience, and because I'm imagining that rehearsal is really important, the process of rehearsing for you is really important. When you are now doing more film work and there isn't time for that, is this part of the whole process of getting used to film, is finding a way to function without that? Or are you trying to find a way to actually make it happen some other way?
I'm trying to, that's a really good question. I find that the concept of rehearsal is different. There always, for me, has to be rehearsal. So as opposed to gathering at 10:30 in the morning till 5:30 with a group of actors and doing it week after week, I'm rehearsing back in my home, visualizing how the scene might or might not go. I'm sort of thinking about camera angles and whatever, like what it's a tech film is, and what I'm realizing, and it's very exciting to me to have been doing this 20 years and learning a new skill, is just how in theater, your you walk into an audition and the director wants to watch you transform into that character. That's what stage work, I feel, is characterization. Film and TV, you walk into the room and they want to believe that you are that character as you are. That while we were writing this character, we didn't know it, but we were actually thinking of you. That is a very subtle difference. So the nature of rehearsal for me isn't that thing of finding it in whatever in a room would be. Nature of rehearsal is knowing that if this person is me, what's the most natural way I can do me?
Interesting.
As opposed to taking an extreme version, say Richard III, where I find the hump and I do that and I find the whatever and the characterization and what I don't think in those terms of film and TV. It's like, okay, I've got the role. They want me. Now I'm going to dig deep to bring to because it's me. Let's just dig deeper with the character as opposed to finding it out there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So rehearsal is a different process of thinking for film and TV for me.
This is really, really revelatory for me right now because, like, no. I mean, this might be why it's so hard then for people who are really great on the stage to make that transition then because of what you just said. It's not just about projecting to the back, it's about what you just said about how realizing it's you. It's not this characterization, because even the idea of characterization is kind of big, or has to be big. And what you're saying is like kind of pulling it in, realizing it's you, and putting it just in you, and the camera's going to find it.
It's finding it. It's like there was a wonderful moment when we were shooting Peacemaker, where I went and James wanted me, because I'm talking to John Cena's character through a mic, as Murn, and so he said, come in and just give him the, speak to him so he really hears you through the mic. So I'm watching in the producer island, and it comes to John's close-up, and in the wide shot, medium shot, all had been great. He's doing a great job with it. But we get to the close-up, and that isn't working anymore, what he was doing before. Because it's now the close-up, right? And so James says to him, John, don't move. Don't move. Don't even twitch. Don't. Just think what you're being asked to do and just say the lines. And the camera caught it. Completely caught it.
Yeah,
now, can you imagine doing that on stage? No friggin' way. You can't friggin' do that on stage. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
But it does on camera. So yeah, it's the nature of rehearsal and what that entails, the nature of preparation and what that entails for me in film and TV versus theater is completely different.
I would love you to take me through 3 different directors you've worked with and talk about how they were working good and bad for you. Ivo van Hove, Ruben Santiago Hudson, and you just mentioned him, so I want to hear this now. It's a completely different kind of situation, but James Gunn. Not from like what objectively these great directors, they're very successful, but for what you need, what you needed and what you were seeing, and how they were giving you or not giving you what you needed.
We'll start with Ivo. When you meet him as one of his actors in a project, that project has been in planning for at least 18 months, right? Costume, lighting, staging with his partner Jan and, like Anna together. And especially when I worked with him with Hedda Gabler, he'd even done that production before. This was a revisiting of the production. So you could use the word micromanagement. Yeah. He's an architect building blocks throughout. You go into rehearsal is in full costume, a set built, pre-built, full set. So you're going into it already. So what does that say? Some actors will look at that and go, oh, this is too managed. I can't find whatever. And I get that. I get how that can, and he wants you off book, which I love, before first day of rehearsal. What Ivo gave to me, I remember, and I'll use an example of it. So this might clarify, because it's hard, when you're talking about this stuff, it's sometimes hard to explain. But there's a moment where Love Bog has to admit that he destroyed a manuscript he wrote. This is in Hedda Gabler. And Ivo said to me, and we're playing the scene, and he says, Chuck, I want you to just fall on your knees, face out to the audience, and just find as much of a neutral tone of doing it on your knees to the audience. Now the actor is saying, how do I justify falling on my knees without being over dramatic?
Mm-hmm.
How do I not look at her when I'm telling her about this child? How do I not make it about my pain? But I did it. I just did it. I said, my first instinct is always to do, and then see how that sits with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it. And I realized, oh, wait, this moment in the play isn't about me being destroyed. By the time I get to this moment in the play, I'm already destroyed. I'm already on the path to suicide. I'm already there. I'm not showing people my distress. That happened off stage when I was getting drunk. At this point, I'm done. I'm on the path. And that falling to your knees and looking out and just saying it, devastating. And he knew that. So Ivo, I guess, if I were to try and phrase it, gave me the acceptance and power of the image as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
The image is as powerful as anything. And if you can allow your internal life to meet that image, which is what he does when he's blocking you and whatever, you get something special that is hard to explain, but people feel it. You feel in Ivo's productions. So that's what I got from him.
And wait, before you move on, I want to button that. You would never have had that revelation if you didn't. I mean, and it's not just doing it, because you have to do it because he's the boss. But I'm talking about realizing in yourself, this might be like, let me see if this will work. You know,
let me see.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. Let me see, and that's something I like to lead with. Let me see. And if I hadn't done that moment, and it was for me the moment, and for people I know and trust that came to see it, it was the moment for them. The only way I could do that was to just say, let me see. And that's what came out. And I can't, because I'd never done or felt that before and haven't really, it was unique to that moment. It was a moment of let me see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something an actor should do. So I guess Ivo taught me about let me see in many ways. I was always like that, I feel, but I think he confirmed that for me. And together with the power of architecture in performance, your architecture, your body as a piece of architecture also. Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay, who else did you name? You named
well, before you talk
Ruben.
about Ruben,
you
know, he's been on the show. I've also had people on the show that have worked with him that have said, I love this man and I hate this man. He's the most full of himself person I've ever met in my life, and I love him. I just want you to be free to, like, this is all on the record, all that stuff I just said. It's not like somebody told me this off camera.
Right.
So
Ruben was one of the word I would use is initially intimidating, because I got a call that Ruben, the public, when I met him was when I did Othello in the Park, and he directed me, and they called and said, Ruben wants to have a sit down with you. Not an audition, a sit down. And he's a product of Lackawanna Blues, if you've seen that. You know, he's a product of that. A survivor. The tongue is the knife. Quick thinking. People want to say full of himself. I see that as a deep, the arrogance of the strut. The strut that Ruben, coming through this industry when he did, needed to have to get where he got to. Because of course, Ruben tells a story, and he'll tell a story about himself, but you know, there's a difference between people who talk about themselves and are just obnoxious, and someone who talks about themselves with pride. And that's the difference. Ruben talks about himself with pride, and he'll tell the story, and you want to listen, because the pride, you want to feed off some of that, you know. And the product, I always say, look at those around him. Jeannie, his wife, you know, the most beautiful soul in the world. His kids, Trey and Lily, you know. I mean, that's how you really know someone, you know. So yeah, I get it, how it might seem a bit much on front footed, but consider him the product of what he came from and where he's come and the strut that it required to be who he is. And you know, that's infectious. So as a director, to move on to your next question, is when that person decides this role, I couldn't trust anyone to direct me in because I didn't trust them to look out for Othello as opposed to looking out for Iago. I'm now going to direct, and I want you to be my avatar on that stage. That's confidence building. And as a director, he's a true romantic. It was about the billowing curtains in the back. It was about the row. It was about the love. But one thing we connected on was that if people don't buy, we only have a scene and a half, Desdemona and Othello, to prove their love before it all starts going wrong. If people don't buy that, we don't have a play. And he bought that 100%. And that's what we did. So with Ruben, if I were to sum him up a bit like Eva, I would say he's performing at the same time as you are. You're his avatar on that stage. So you have a sense of you're taking on the story beyond Ruben. He's passing it on to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To take on, and he's a true, if I use architect for Eva, I'd say romantic for Ruben in his directing. He's a true romantic he has a love story with the human spirit.
And let me ask you about something you just said. What does that mean that he couldn't find someone to look out for him in that role and he was going to look out for you? Like, what does that really mean?
Well, the history of Othello, since Ira Aldridge did it, and as literally the first Black guy to actually play Othello, was that all the great actors of the time in the 19th century, late 18th into the 19th, wanted to play Iago. Mm-hmm. And then Ira Aldridge plays Othello, and it's brilliant. And suddenly all the white actors want to play Othello. And then again, it's gone round again, where now usually in a production of Othello, 9 out of 10 times, who's the big star in the production? It's the Iago in modern day. That's the star, that's the whatever. And then they get someone, and then a lot of the direction you watch is focused on Iago charming the hell out of the audience, making Othello look like an idiot.
I see, yeah.
When actually Iago is so convincing at what he does that anyone would have fallen for it. Mm-hmm. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So his whole point is like, he didn't trust directors not to make the centerpiece Iago.
I see.
But to make the centerpiece the love story and the tragic story. Mm-hmm. And that's what he wanted to do with our production, and I think that's where we went.
I saw it in the park. I have to tell you, yeah, and that this makes sense now why it was powerful. It's almost like imbalanced if it's the other way. Like you balance it somehow now, and you feel it happening now. What has to happen?
Yes.
And then when you get into film, and you yourself have said you haven't been doing film that long or in a serious way, so it's just been the past couple years here. And now you're on big productions and on this grand scale. So you have this director working with you now, James Gunn, who loves you, who says you're one of the great actors he's ever worked with, and has cast you again in something that there's only rumors about. But so interesting, like coming from all of these different ways of doing it, having these people helming things that are very much an actor's medium. Now having somebody helming it, where that's only part of the spectacle here. And how did he handle you as an actor in that?
Well, my very first interaction with James was hearing from my agents that how much he loved the tape I did for Peacemaker. Because I never met James, I never auditioned for him. I just did a tape, and how he changed his mind about what the character was from my tape. So immediately trust is established, that he sees what I do and wants it, right? James is himself an actor. He acted a lot. He gets actors and he writes for actors. I remember I mentioned that the best writers are directing the actors with their writing.
Right.
So as much as, yes, you're right, film isn't the actor's medium, it's the director and editor's medium. But there's an actor writing and directing it in James. So I find it's very character friendly. Mm-hmm. He's telling me, I saw hints in 3 pages of what Murn should be. When he offered me the role in Guardians, complex and singular in its nature compared to what we've seen before, I still knew, even if James was saying to me, I need you to help me ground this guy and make sense of him, even though it hadn't fully made sense. He'd already written enough for me to know where I believed he wanted to go with it. So as much as, and then on, I mean, obviously I can't go into specifics, but there've been scenes in Guardians that I'm telling you felt like live theater. And certainly James's pushing of me when I present him with something and he feels, oh, we can go further, takes me to the challenges of life, to the point where I'll go on vocal rest afterwards. Like at the end of the shoot day, I'll go on vocal rest. And you leave it there. So I can't speak for how he works with other actors and stuff, but certainly when we work together, I feel that he's ready in many ways of how I feel the rehearsal room is. You've presented this idea. This is what we have here. That's good. How far can we take it? Let's sculpt it. Let's bring it back here. I know you can do it. Let's do this. You've given me this idea. Okay, let's take it this way. So it's organic, and it comes from trust. And my favorite experiences with directors, and I've been blessed with working with a few. You think of Sir Michael Boyd and the RSC that gave me my start. Richard Eyre, Sam Mendes. I'm not naming these to name drop, but to just Ava DuVernay. It's like to see how different they all are.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, Barry Jenkins, one thing I appreciate the most that these people gave me was a sense of, we trust you. What have you got? Okay, let's take it further. Thank you for that. They initially trust you with they see what you have, and then they're ready to say, I believe you can even take it further. And that is the best gift. A true, an actor who really wants to surprise themselves can have, is when people do that to you or allow you to do that. Yeah.
It's interesting how even somebody like Hove, who is so particular about things, is still giving you that kind of freedom and still. Right?
Absolutely. That's what people mistake. They think that, again, James is one who storyboards everything beforehand,
mm-hmm.
Everything. But that doesn't mean you're locked in.
Mm-hmm.
That means this is where we start. And if you bring something that will break those walls, break it, smash it. But you have that safety net of the wall I've created for you to get going with, to start with that, see where that goes. Sometimes the wall, that structure is enough. Sometimes you break it. Sometimes you realize the structure should have been very different, but they're watching and they're listening and they understand the X factor that is bringing in an actual real person to bring to life this thing you've created in your head.
Right.
You understand the value of that.
We'll be right back after this. If you're an actor and you don't know about Jenna Doolittle's Actors Rise newsletter, let me tell you about it because you're going to want to sign up. Jenna is a working actor and a career coach, and she started the Actors Rise newsletter early on in the pandemic as a way to keep actors informed, engaged, and inspired. It grew from being sent to 36 people to over 7,000. Actors love this thing. It's chock full of updated information on events, classes, business info, acting tips, timely industry news, discounts, and tons of other resources. And it's free. And it's coming from an actor who cares about actors and wants to see them succeed. You can just feel it in her. Subscribe at actorsrise.com. And you can also follow Jenna on Instagram at actorsrise. It was fascinating to hear you talk about how you, as an actor who formerly has done Hamlet, joining in with other actors that you know who have played Hamlet in your inability to watch people play Hamlet anymore.
All right, yeah, yeah.
I found that fascinating. It's like that particular role, like you and Jude Law talking about, and I saw him, and I saw that production. I don't see a lot. It's funny that I've seen these.
Yeah, I'm so glad you have.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I found that fascinating that there's something about you the way you talked about it was beautiful. It's almost like watching somebody make love to your wife, and that's a great analogy, I thought, and it kind of it made me realize what you're talking about. And but I was wondering, do you even like you said that one role that you'd really like to play is Macbeth, and I was wondering, do you see when you're like just in the process of just even thinking about that one day, do you avoid watching Macbeths? Like, did you see Denzel doing Macbeth?
I haven't seen Denzel, but I'm not going to avoid that one. I think when a master like him is taking on the role, you should see it. You just should see. You owe it to yourself to see it. No, when I haven't played the role yet, no, I don't have the same thing. And also, for even roles I've played, I don't have the same thing. There's something particular about Hamlet.
Interesting.
I don't think you experience Hamlet and can never let it go. I don't know what it is, Peter. I'm not going to pretend that I understand it. But it is a role that you play, and after you've played it, you go, I'm a different actor. Actually, I'll be more specific. I'm a better actor, having done it. Doesn't matter whether your performance was loved or beloved or slammed. Going through it, you're a better actor. I cannot put I'll go see someone else do Henry VI. I'll go see someone else play Lovborg. I mean, I don't go to the theater as much because sometimes it feels like a busman's holiday for me, so I don't bother. But I'd see them. But Hamlet, and I think, and if I were to guess at why, I'm not going to generalize, but for me, it's because despite the heights I reached for myself personally, my growth doing it, I still feel it's unfinished business. And most of the roles, basically every other role I've played, when I'm done with it, I'm like, I'm good, I'm done. Yeah, I did it. Hamlet feels like unfinished business. So watching someone else do it feels almost like they're taking on doing something you haven't finished with, or you're, in that analogy I used, literally replacing you with someone you love, and that's particular to Hamlet. And I don't know why, but it was such a relief to find out it wasn't just me talking to Jude and then him saying that Alan Rickman was the same. I go, well, thank God for that. It's not just me.
Do you know Papa Essiedu? Have you talked to him about that?
I know, yes,
Have you talked to him?
No, I haven't spoken. Actually, yes, we spoke very briefly after he'd had his run of doing it at the RSC. And we didn't speak about this part of it because I believe when I met him, I had done Hamlet already. We didn't get into it. It was very brief. We met I was doing something at the National. I think he'd come to see it, and it wasn't time to go into depth in it. But it'd be a conversation we would have down the road at some point. Well,
you just gave me a great idea. So this is my pitch. How about the first Back to One documentary motion picture is actors sitting around talking about Hamlet that they played.
Let's do it.
The Great Amazing Hamlets. I mean,
we're
just watching people talk about that. Wouldn't that be amazing?
It would be amazing. I mean, you would see a transformation in all those people right in front of your eyes as they revisited it. We
have good Hamlets recently. We've had some really good Hamlets.
Ruth, I mean, there's been, and you know what? I genuinely think you have to try really hard to screw up Hamlet. The production might not be great, but you as an actor, if you've earned the right to be asked to do Hamlet, you have to try really hard to screw it up. You might not please all of the people all of the time, but you definitely are going to please some of the people some of the time with the Hamlet because it's that foolproof a role. So I don't think there's an excuse for being a bad Hamlet. There might be a bad production, but I don't think there's an excuse for being a bad Hamlet, a universally derided Hamlet, because there's too much of him that you can tap onto. You might not be the most complete Hamlet, but there's going to be aspects of him that you can grab onto and reveal to the world. That's the beauty of that role.
Martin Scorsese just said one little thing about comic book movies, kind of pejoratively, and it has never let him go. There's people that are still hounding him about this. He actually wrote an article and kind of tried to clean it up a little bit, but it made it worse. They're plowing him with it, and so you have people on both sides, using Scorsese as see, this is the end of movies. that this is taking over. And then you have other people who are like, Scorsese's old, and he doesn't get it, and they keep going on both sides.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, what do you say to people who are thinking to themselves, why is one of our great actors doing comic book movies? What do you say?
I say, as a child, first of all, thank you for calling me one of the great actors. But this one of our great actors, as a child, stared at a cup for hours trying to make it move like he'd seen Luke Skywalker do it in Star Wars. Ran around his home in Lagos, Nigeria, thinking that if he really did run fast enough, he might take off like Superman. Acting means that those things I imagined for a brief time, I am allowed to be. And doing these projects, call them, just comic books, are the closest to being that kid again for me. And the themes I get to deal with doing this stuff are as innocent sometimes as being a child, but as relevant. And if we paid more damn attention to them, we might learn something as adults. That's the answer I would give to that.
Probably the most relatable thing I ever heard you say, and this is saying a lot because I relate to a lot of what you say and I learned a lot from you in other places. You said, a perfect day for you is reading a book and drinking coffee.
Yeah.
And this is a quote from you and it relates to this. You said, just because we have the incredible privilege that what we've chosen to do for a living is something we actually love, doesn't mean that's all we are.
Yeah.
That is so important. And the thing I want to add to that is, and I want you to then talk about this, is the job of the actor, though, is different than every other job because everything can be applied to it. Everything feeds it. You can be upset that you've been harangued into going to visit your in-laws and you're going to be away from your culture and you're going to be away from your work, but that is going to feed your work. Yeah. That event, the work of the actor is always going on. And I think that this whole aspect of it about how there is more to life than this and realizing that is actually feeding the thing that you care most about, which is this work.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't have put it better. You put it really well, that part of the joy for me of, shall we say, use that word, the dreaded S word, success, if you want to use that, and all this, is how much it allows me to relax into living the rest of my life. I.e., my wife and I, when we have a child, knowing this child will probably be, I don't have to worry about the next paycheck and the child's going to be okay. Life doesn't imitate art. Life and art are intertwined in a grotesquely intimate way, So what do you do if, on like a 2-hour journey in a play, you don't want to be that character that goes from zero to high and back down? So how do you make sure that actually that's just that 2-hour journey? And my thing is, I look at my family, just as an aside, my dad didn't buy his first pair of shoes till he was 16. And I'm not talking flip-flops, 16. And yet he ended up being a senior diplomat with the United Nations. My mom didn't finish high school, and yet she later on put herself through college and became a diplomat with the United Nations. These people who are my role models, my waking role models, despite their ambition and success professionally, of which when you consider where they came from to where they went, I can probably never match given the head start I got, put their family and the well-being, which was their life, first in every major decision, right? When I say I love reading a book and drinking coffee, it's those moments of sitting back and just doing the very thing that got me into acting. Imagination, people watching, having a chance that, my job allows me that it's 3 p.m. in the afternoon in the weekday to be sitting here having a coffee and enjoying a book, because I don't know how much time I have to do that going forward. When you understand that, as lucky as we are, as I said, to do something we love, it is still just a job. And there's this other thing called life that if you're lucky, that job allows you to live as opposed to being one or the other. Then I think you find some secrets. I think you discover some answers to some secrets. I think you give yourself a break. I think you look at yourself with sympathy. Those driving things. I remember as a 20 or 30-year-old thinking, I am an actor. That's all I am. That's bull. The very reason someone hires you is because you're bringing something in that is uniquely yours, And the longer we go thinking I am an actor, that vague concept of what an artist, let's say artist in general is, the longer we keep thinking we know what that means, the further away from it we're really getting. The X factor is always you. And you only feed yourself by doing the things you love, not the things that, you think you should be doing. And that's how I feel about it.
Chukwudi Iwuji, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.